So, having successfully negotiated your agreement, there are just two final steps in this process. One, the confirmation of all the details that were agreed, and two, the implementation and the follow up. Straightforward as these steps sound, there are quite a few deals that come unhinged and go badly wrong at this stage, despite all the hard work and goodwill that was put into negotiating them in the first place. So, this episode is going to cover some of the pitfalls and ways to avoid them in these final steps. Years ago, when I was involved in contracts with government and military facilities, the documentation and the surrounding material that supported the agreements was just unbelievably large and detailed. So there was really very little wiggle room for misunderstanding. Also, in larger corporate arrangements, there'll be whole legal departments that are going back and forth and working out the fine details of these things. What we're concerned with here is more of the everyday type negotiation, even the handshake kind of deals, where a failure to confirm at the time all the specific details with the other party can really lead to misunderstandings and issues down the road. First off, if you have a chance to just in a quick email or summary letter confirm exactly, the price, the time frame, what's agreed, all the steps, who's responsible for what, schedule of implementation, even if it's something as, every day as you and a neighbor agreeing, the repair of a boundary garden wall between your two properties, all of these things up front, if they're laid out clearly, mean that you're not going to have misunderstandings down the road, either genuine misunderstandings or deliberate ones. Sometimes people will take advantage of unclear wording at the time. Just having that documented early also means that if there were any misunderstandings from your conversation to what's being put down on paper, you can deal with it early. You can deal with it straight away, and go back before time has passed and then things are going to erode, and then the chance of goodwill being evaporated are going to increase, and you could end up having a major falling out over a genuine simple misunderstanding that could have been put right earlier on. The wheels can also really badly come off of a deal when it comes time for implementation and follow-up. And this can happen at the very highest levels. So I'll just give a quick illustration that comes from the Cuban Missile Crisis back in 1962. So to set the stage, the US and the Soviet Union are almost coming to blows over the installation of Russian missiles on the island of Cuba, the world basically on the brink of nuclear war. So to try to avert this, there were some back-channel communications that were going on between the Kennedy administration and the Soviets that not all of Kennedy's negotiating team was even aware of. So this brought about a deal, and the deal in summary was this: that the Russians would remove the missiles that had been discovered, had been seen by the US spy planes, and in exchange the US would remove some of the missiles that they had placed abroad, i.e. specifically in Turkey, that were seen as a threat to Russia. So this was the deal. It was agreed by both sides, but when it came time for implementation, then a few interesting things happened. First, on the Russian side, there were also some smaller, short-range tactical nuclear weapons that had been brought into Cuba, but these were unnoticed. And so the question arose, should these be kept on the island, as Castro wanted them to be kept there as a deterrence against a future invasion or a defense against such an invasion from the US? But the Soviets were really sure what would happen if these were discovered, and they'd already just gone through a crisis. So there was a bit of a debate as to whether they'd be pulled out or not and show good faith. In the end, they were. On the American side, there was a similar thing. Many in America's military establishment felt that Kennedy had done a bad deal, that he'd sold out too easily, and that these missiles shouldn't be removed from Turkey. And so there was a little bit of foot dragging and delay on that part. And eventually, yes, they were removed, but without some obstacles. And Kennedy, as both president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, really felt that, his word would have instantly guaranteed that the the missiles would be sorted and removed, and it wasn't as straightforward as that. So again, the implementation phase of that deal almost completely derailed the agreement that would have been made at the time. So leaving high drama of the Cuban Missile Crisis and coming back down to the more mundane day-to-day business deals that we're dealing with here. So let's talk about implementation, follow-up, quality control, quality assurance as that deal is implemented. So what is often the case is that sometimes the people that are negotiating a deal are not exactly the same ones who are going to be implementing it. Maybe on the negotiating team, there aren't even representatives of the people that will be implementing that deal. And that can create a bit of an issue. Communication lags, disruptions, issues, problems on either side or both sides. So it's really important to have very clear documentation and to involve people all the way through the process who are going to be responsible for implementing these deals and these arrangements, because sometimes the implementation of something that would seem very simple and straightforward to a negotiator actually on the ground doesn't turn out to be that way. And without that kind of direct feedback, then these are going to be unknowns that we only stumbled across later. Having a specific time frame, schedule, who's accountable for what and when, just these standard quality assurance, quality control features will really help ensure that these type of things don't happen. Delegation can also be a problem. Delegation is great. Nothing will really get done unless people are able to delegate things. It's just the way business is. But sometimes in delegating, then people will, almost wash their hands too much of an affair and not be aware or on top or do the follow-up to make sure that those who were now put in charge of executing this deal and these arrangements really are fully aware of what needs to be happening and are in fact doing so. So again, making sure that you keep on top of that, track it as you would do any other project, even if it's just a small handshake deal that needs to be followed through. Again, this will all solve problems, avoid heartache that can easily be dealt with in the short term, as opposed to further down the line when you've got a much bigger problem that's grown and then you've lost trust and understanding. Effective follow-up on a deal, scheduled follow-up, being in touch with the other party, making sure that they're happy with how things are going, can also be one of the best ways to build a relationship that's going to help with future business down the line. Maybe we're not just looking at a one-off scenario here. Maybe we are, but that could be parlayed into long-term business, which is always more sustainable than a short-term one-off. And having a good open channel of communication means that when things go wrong, and in the real world they very often do, then you're having a good platform from which to start to resolve that issue. And indeed, if something does go a bit wrong with a deal, an arrangement, and you're able to put whatever it is right very quickly, very effectively, offer a sincere apology, and make the person on the other side of the table understand that you care about how well you're doing this job for them, then really that can almost be a bonus. It really can be. People who have no problems that arise during a deal or an arrangement, yeah, that's great, that's fine, that's an amazing implementation. The reality is that chances are something will go wrong. It's normal. And if you're able to do that in a really effective way, it just makes you stand out, and you're a much better long-term prospect to do business with than if it hadn't been put right. In summary, a really crucial part of any deal is the final documentation that's clear, that's delivered quickly, that both parties sign up to, and forms the structure and the basis for the implementation phase. And in terms of implementation, again, just having a very solid, structured means of communication between both parties and within both the negotiating team and the implementation team on each side of the desk just means that if problems arise, they're much more likely to be sorted out, dealt with quickly and effectively, and you're going to be a much better partner to be looking at in terms of future business opportunities with that same potential customer in the future.